We have quick intros, being that not much of a transition. You have Heidi and myself. Real quickly, I'll give you a little bit about my background. Today, we're talking about transitional placement decision making. So what is the process that we have in our minds when we either hit a wall and are having difficulties placing someone with an intellectual or developmental disability somewhere that fits their needs? What do we do? So Heidi, Thomas, and I are going to be sharing our experiences and a little bit from the literature elsewhere. What have people been doing? What do they say about this topic? And then the rest of the time, based on Heidi's examples and your experiences, we're going to really dig into this. So the other housekeeping and just a little bit about myself, and Heidi, please feel free to do the same. I'm a developmental psychologist by training, child clinical psychologist master's from Marshall as well, and I have the opportunity to be the director of the Center for Excellence in Disabilities in West Virginia. Heidi, you care to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Heidi Thomas. I hope you can hear me okay. I've been having some sound issues, but I'm actually transitioning out of the Division Director of IDD Services at Westbrook into the Director of QA and Compliance. My background is really crazy weird. I was in the military for about 13 years. I've mostly worked in acute care. I found this field about 4.5 years ago. I'm working on my ABA master's now, just so I can get my BCBA. But that's kind of my big thing. Probably the reason why I'm here talking is because we sadly have the only crisis response unit in the state for IDD. And in reality, as most of you guys know, and we found out really quickly, it really cannot be called a crisis site because you can't just get people in right away, just because some of the complexity. And so those are some of the things we'll discuss.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, and I'll try to keep up with the waiting room. So again, you're here because this is the third session of a larger series, and we're talking about our rising institutionalization rates for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities here in West Virginia. This is a series just for those of us who experience these items in West Virginia from different lenses, to talk about it, problem solve, and then perhaps provide recommendations to those who make those big changes that we need to happen. Okay, today, again, we're talking about decision making and finding options, gathering information. What is it all about? So transitional living options, we're going to summarize kind of you might know all of this, but this is from the national literature. Again, what are they saying? Then we're going to, for the case, we're going to get an idea of illustrating an example, analyzing the good, the bad, the ugly in those decision makings, what worked, what didn't work. And then also talk about these temporary placement arrangements that we may or may not have available to us, and what other people have recommended for increasing those options. So I've already introduced myself, and so let's, in terms of the literature, a few kind of just behind the scenes. Session 1 and Session 2 gave us a little bit of this already. So what do we talk? Who's the population we're talking about? Again, those with developmental and intellectual disabilities. This slide, in general, you all know this. Age years 5 to 22 years of age. Mental, physical condition is likely to occur indefinitely. Here are 3 or more categories of limitations where they're often used to diagnose or describe someone's intellectual or developmental disability. That 4th bullet, just some examples: autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, seizure disorder. And then this statistic has come as an average statistic. That's why the approximately 14% of the US children, now we're talking across the lifespan in this case, in this series, but just among children have a developmental disability. This is a broad definition, of course, but we're talking about, and I don't have to, know I'm preaching to the choir, a considerable proportion of our population, not only nationally, but also in West Virginia. All right, remember to mute yourself if you don't mind. All right, so in terms of one of the challenges that have also come up in the first two sessions was that the behaviors, if you particularly have someone with an intellectual developmental disability who has severe behaviors, disruptive behaviors, this is where some of the challenges of finding transitional placement occurs. What do we mean by challenging behaviors? So abnormal behaviors that either relate to intensity, the frequency at which they're exhibited, the duration of time, that involve the physical safety of the individual or others around that individual, okay? Behavior which is likely to seriously limit, again, disruptive to themselves and others around them. And then the last bullet, some examples, the more common examples, and the ones we've been talking about the last 2 months include aggressive behaviors, self-injurious behaviors, other stereotypical or more common disruptive behaviors, again, to that person's quality of life and daily living. Measuring this before we get into the decision making, I wanted to make sure, Heidi and I were wanting to make sure that we were all getting at the same page, that what is a challenging or disruptive or severe behavior. And so the idea that 2 or more people can agree on that behavior on some basis, some measurable basis, is where we're wanting to get at, right? So a reliable assessment, even after a couple of days. An example would be self-injurious behaviors. Measurement, individual, forcibly hitting one's own body with open or closed fists or banging head against self or objects. That's written in a way that it could be measurable. Instead of just self-injurious behavior, that piece, what is it? We could add more to be more helpful, and we're going to get into that. The less specific we get, the less reliability we get. Now, why are we talking about it again? Is because if we're talking about transitional plans and placement that fits their needs, we need to be very specific about what the challenges and what the behaviors are. Just an individual checklist for making sure we have it down right for others to review and concur. Count or time of the behavior, how long the behavior takes before it occurs. So we have something that happens, and when does the behavior start? And that could be time, minutes, seconds. Did we observe, or can we observe the behavior? Can we measure the behavior? Will a stranger know exactly what the behavior looks like after reading your definition? Do you get an idea, if I wrote it down, what I'm talking about and could look out for it? Can you explain the behavior that I've written down, or you need more information? And then could we break the behavior into smaller specific pieces so it's more observable? Again, we want to reliably concur that this is happening. If we take someone out of a placement, or if a perfect placement for them based on their needs is no longer available because of a behavior, what is it? What is the challenge? What part of the behavior? And this is just visually showcasing what pieces of the behaviors or behavior we're talking about. So again, frequency at the top. How many times does this occur? Did it occur once or more than once? How long does it happen when it does happen? Does it vary? Okay, what does it vary on? Topography is how. So does something tend to occur before it happens? What happens after? Does the reinforcement, does some type of reinforcing event happen? And then permanent product is more of, I can say that they're throwing items, they're breaking furniture, but breaking pieces, I need to get very specific on that instead of just aggressive behavior. All right. So why are we talking about it? These types of behaviors tend to occur more often or more prevalent among individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So there are several reviews across studies in the US as well as international, and across those studies, they say about 15 to 17.5% of people with this diagnosis exhibit these challenging behaviors, okay? The types of behaviors vary, okay? And of course, across these studies, it depends on who tells you, and how specific and reliable they are. So in one, just an example here, about 19% of individuals from parent report or caregiver report engaged in self-injurious behaviors. That could be different if it was from other type of source. So just to give an example. Some factors associated with more prevalence or greater prevalence of these behaviors, more severe levels of intellectual developmental disability, a comorbid psychopathology, and then someone who's having communication deficiencies isn't able to express themselves, communicate. Okay. If a severe behavior, again, things that we've talked about and things that this group can give so many examples for. Severe behaviors are more associated with teacher burnout and stress for kids in classrooms, and they tend to bring about restrictive processes or occur more often in reaction to restrictive processes. So this whole escalation of events that we've heard more and more in the media and seen more in our experiences brings about even more of this severe behavior. So we need to talk about options that de-escalate the behavior outside of the transitional living piece. So many times people seclude the individual, restrain the individual, or consider medication. I wanted to include this because it came up in session 2 with Dr. Clayman, and particularly noting that and we're going to get into this in another session, I think session 5 with Dr. Swaggart. I'm here Heidi and I are talking about a behavior and how it might relate to where we're placing someone today. But the etiology, the reason behind the behavior is equally, perhaps more important than the behavior itself. And so this table talks about, just puts it out there for us to consider. It's not just the behavior, which you can see in the 3rd column, but is the individual hungry? Are they lonely? Are they engaged in a difficult situation to them? Low level, high level stimulation. We need to get to that to really decrease the behavior at hand. Ooh. Sorry. All right. It tends to want to move. Okay, so housing. We're here today to talk about housing options and how do we decide where to put people. So supportive housing, and again, this is from the literature, best practice intervention, again, stable housing is what our goal is for any individual, regardless of disability or circumstances. Literature shows that if we get someone to stay in housing up to, actually this says 6 years, but it even worked down, some studies were saying up to 2 years, we can, it's highly predictive of a stable housing over time. Some of the factors and the difficulties with types of housing, again, nothing that you all don't already know. Homelessness comes in, rehospitalization, funding sources come into play. And this figure is from a couple of studies nationally. HRSA did this, shows about in their sample, where were people located who had intellectual or developmental disabilities on average. So group homes, agency operated apartments, about 1/3, independent apartments, 19%, institutionalizations, our rates, Bob Hansen had mentioned are even a little higher than this, and we're that option's becoming more and more prevalent. So why are we in that situation? Heidi's going to talk a little bit about this related to the cases, but just some of these examples of funding that has changed over time or even just recently. Sometimes funding has been there, but only in certain pockets, pays for certain things. So providers must, it's like a patchwork, must get these things together for both the care as well as the housing components, as there's not one thing that does it all consistently over time. And then of course, some funding, as many of us have been involved, is at risk and potentially declining. Okay, just another visual, the other factors, so funding, options, the diversity of the placements, meeting the placement, or the placement, how able the placement is to meet the individual's needs, all of that is there. But then our workforce, we've also talked about in past sessions, limited, so on one end you have a limitations, and on the other end you have a very strong or resources that we can build from. So we have difficulty hiring and maintaining trained staff on the left. We have issues with referrals for needed services, the process falling in some cracks, compensation for different levels may or may not be there, what it should be. And then even our case last month talked about this rigidity and how in some cases, flexibility and autonomy are needed to appropriately make decisions that benefit the individual in placement. On the other side, again, well-trained team with particular skills, team approach available, so that connectivity there, that team's appropriately compensated, and those available supports are there. We tend to either go to the left or working in the middle here. And this discussion today is how do we work effectively in the middle? Sometimes with limited or often with limited resources, how do we work within that middle? Okay, so a person must be assessed and placed in a setting based on that assessment. So that must be part of the process. The ideal would be that we have options, right? And that person could be moved based on changes in their needs. So as the third bullet said, if destabilized, may need to move into a higher level of care and then come back. That there's that flexibility that may or may not be there for some, for our transition care in West Virginia. Services that are high quality. We need more outpatient services with linkages. You guys mentioned that last time. And then, yeah, we have outdated laws that also prevent us from providing care. Keep that in mind for the recommendations that we produce from this group and this effort, okay? So without going too much into it, you're going to get the slides, you're going to get these resources. Many of these collaboratives and initiatives elsewhere, these are in different states, have really helpful materials and guidelines and flow sheets that are really helpful. Those will all be in that email that follows up, and you can click and you can go to it, and hopefully if you feel like using it, it's ready to go. These are just examples of that, how people have incorporated that flexibility, working with that person's needs as they change, providing more care or less care over time. And then how the funding comes into play. Many of these have also found funding for that purpose. And here's just, again, other examples where community life, they have incorporated that community living, that inclusivity, while also providing that high level of care for the severe behaviors, the disruptive behaviors during that time where they tend to be significantly disruptive, and then they come back, okay? And then again, more lessons learned. I don't want to take away, I want more of the discussion from us, but you'll get these. Illinois, Connecticut, and California tend to be the states that have dabbled in this and have some prominent models. Okay, Heidi, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'll work the slides if that's okay.
That'd be great. Again, my name's Heidi. And of course, I would be remiss without saying that I know a lot of us are a little nervous because the potential funding slash that they're discussing right now, and that's definitely something that is on everyone's mind. Interestingly, as I transitioned from my IDD role into the quality role, I encountered a individual last week, not waiver, and so this is why this is important that I have someone in the CRU who's not waiver who's been there for 4 months. I'm sure we can also all agree that we don't have the right continuum of care in the state of West Virginia for our individuals, whether they're waiver or not. And sometimes, as I'm seeing the other side of our mental health business, uh, the IDD folks are here all the time, and they're not waiver, and it's very interesting. I went from a very sheltered world with caring for the population to now I'm seeing some things that was really difficult. And the reason why I wanted to share this one was because I actually probably learned a little bit about myself and my boundaries last week because I got very kind of emotionally into the situation. We had an individual show up, 32 years old, has been in and out of the services for us for since 2014, did our CFT program. That's more of a community focused training, more of the mental health folks, but also probably some folks who didn't get IDD diagnoses prior to 22. Um, this individual had the mild IDD and also schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, without a good prognostic features. Very high functioning though. And I think so both my cases are the people I think who fall through the cracks. This person showed up to our CSU, our Crisis Stabilization Unit. I mentioned earlier that we have our Crisis Response Unit, and definitely since we've been involved with Bob, we've definitely learned we are not really crisis because you have to be careful of who you put in a unit with IDD. Um, it's not as simple as people will just AMAing or different things of that nature, so it gets a little bit more complicated. But this individual was evicted from their home. When the crisis staff got me, they say, like, look, we have an individual who's IDD, has two black eyes, and the significant other just got a medical and financial power of attorney yesterday.
I know this because I'm afraid I'm going to get fired.
Somebody's mute came in. Oh, there we go. And so power of attorneys definitely were red flags. I'm not sure if anybody else was like, oh, crap. But from my protected worldview, why is this person getting these power of attorneys? So I went in and talked to the individual, and it, again, very high functioning. I asked about waiver, had them call waiver to see if they had waiver because they weren't really sure. They came off voluntarily in 2020, which is either because of COVID or because, as I learned speaking with her longer and longer, um, they really wanted their independence. And they liked having a worker, but they didn't want someone telling them what to do all the time. And so we just talked, and I reassured them that you're a very important member of our society. You still need supports. We want to make sure we help you. Um, can we get you into this program just for a few days so we can try to help you out because you were evicted, you don't have a place to go. We had separated from the significant other, and they started crying, and they said, I wish you were my mom or my sister. Will you be my worker? And I had to say, look, I need to put some boundaries up with you. I can be your coach and I can be your mentor, but I cannot be your family or friend. Um, and I said, look, if you can get you into the CSU, I'll come visit you Monday. We can talk about getting you into other programs, and we'll get you into programs to try to get you signed up for some training for a job. We actually have an open bed in our mental health supportive living, but they indicated they did not want to be in a group home setting again. And I came back, the power of attorney situation. So I will tell you that the power of attorney for medical was limited. So I explained to the significant other, you can only use this if the person's incapacitated. They have a state appointed payee, so I let them know that they'd have to go to court to get that. And it was basically not good paperwork. But when I came back to the unit the next day, they had AMA'd 4 hours after going in on Friday. My first response was I wanted to go out and look around town, and then that's when I started to realize my boundaries are not good. They also revealed to me that they had been using meth a couple days prior. So these are all the things that, like, I'm all I just want to take you and hold you and take care of you because that's not, I'm in a very protected world recently with all my folks might have behaviors, but at least at nighttime they go to bed and they're safe. And so I was introduced to a very different side of this. I did not know, I don't know how to help them now that they're gone. And I hope that they pop up again. And because they're out there and they're being taken advantage of and they're homeless. And I'll go be honest with you, that's very scary. And so sometimes there's the limitations with waiver is not knowing that not everybody can get those supports. So this was very hard because this person I couldn't have put in the CRU, even if it was something I could do quickly, because of the fact that the independent side of it was so important to them, and while our CRU is not locked, we are going to follow you. You can't just AMA and roll out. I have to keep you safe, and that probably wouldn't have been a good solution for her. So it definitely came down to what resources do we have that can help. And unfortunately, unless you're waiver, it's very hard to get those services to help IDD folks through mental health. So that was the first case. Oh yeah, our goals were housing, programming, and work. And of course, the barrier was AMA. You're muted, Lesley. Sorry.
Thank you. Jillian has a question for you.
Hi, Jillian.
Hi. It's truly not just waiver that has, or members who don't have waiver that have an issue. I have a member who cannot get an ambulance to pick him up
Uh,
or hospital services where we are that will do what he needs to do mental health wise because of his IDD diagnosis.
mhm. I don't disagree at all with that. I just meant that like there's no like there's fewer resources it feels if they don't have waiver. And I agree because we have a lot of doctors who discount our individuals too. I think in one of our counties, if you go in, if we take one of our IDD folks in, it's always a UTI, even if it's not.
Yeah. I mean, this is the ambulances are like, well, we can't pick him up. Your whole job is to pick up people who are having a medical crisis and you're refusing to pick him up. And then you get to the hospital and the hospitals are like, he's too hard for us to be able to do anything with. You're going to have to go home and figure it out on your own. Well, if we could figure it out on our own, why would we be at a hospital?
They won't take you if you're incontinent too. I have a client right now that we've called everywhere in the state, and if they're nonverbal and incontinent, they do not take them. They said they do not have the staff to provide that type of care.
And either do their homes. I mean, it's these members really pose a risk of having no services anywhere.
So
And we can't even get them admitted to the state hospital.
Yeah, there
Because
are no continuum of care.
right, because the process to even get them into to be admitted into the state hospital under a psychiatric whatever requires your local people to do what they are refusing to help you do.
is the nonverbal piece, I guess I'm locking into that because it might be a potential solution there, because they don't have communication boards or.
No, it's because of refusal to attempt to use any of them.
Yeah.
He was able
Yeah,
to.
and they can't ask them. They said they can't ask questions to see how they're feeling. They don't know how to gauge it, that type situation. And
Yeah.
if they're incontinent, they can't. They
Oh, Tiffany, you broke up.
Oh, I'm sorry. They said they don't have the staff to provide that much care to be there and change the diapers and that kind of situation.
Are you rural? I kind of feel like we get the same thing out of our rural counties with our folks. Like we get better service when we're in
No.
Parkersburg.
Yeah. we are in the Eastern Panhandle, and we feel like because
And
we're
where,
so city that everybody just thinks we have services available, and we don't.
yeah, I'm in Huntington, around right where Marshall is, and St. Mary's. None of the hospitals take them if they're incontinent or nonverbal. We've called ARH and Beckley. They won't take them nonverbal incontinent. I mean, we've called everywhere in the state. And if they're nonverbal or incontinent, they said they can't do anything. And my client's been on the same med since he was 9. He's an adult now. And we can't get anybody to do a med review or anything because he's nonverbal.
So does anyone on here, I guess 2 questions. One, figured out a solution or run into something different that could kind of help us with these issues and kind of share your experiences, or 2, advice on how to push it for care? Any thoughts on that? Let me look at the chat.
I think what I would probably do, just as a discussion, is if I would actually go to a provider, like an ED or anything like that, and they refuse care, at that point, I would probably do an APS for neglect. I know it doesn't always
done
solve,
that.
and they're so far behind.
I've done that. They won't touch it. I can't get patient advocate at the hospital to do anything. And it's more than one hospital.
Yeah, we even had mine taken by ambulance to St. Mary's, thinking that if he was there, no, they put mom right back out the door with him.
Tamara, your hand is up. You want to go ahead?
Hey, ladies. I work for CPS in Fayette County, but I have a child who's 22 years old, severe autism, that's in a group home in Huntington. It's called Autism Services Center, and it took forever and a day to get him in there. He was abandoned at Bar H, Beckley Appalachian Regional Hospital, by the facility that he was with because they couldn't handle him. And he was on the waiting list to go to Autism Services Center for 8 months, was left at Bar H but for 8 months before I could get him in Autism Services Center. And they deal more with an autistic population, and he is nonverbal and incontinent. And it's just such a struggle. It's so hard trying to find placement. And I've sat here and called for, placement for people, trying to, kids that need to be placed that have disabilities, and there's just nowhere to put them. There's just nowhere to put them. And it's so discouraging. But that's my take on it.
So some people have said that there's one solution is to make more beds. I want to hear thoughts about that, because the kind of this discussion is it not about beds, but making those beds accessible. I don't want to too far,
And
but
I think there's a couple things.
Can I as far as the beds thing, I am married to a healthcare provider who works in hospitals. And particularly like when COVID came out, like one of the phrases that people used a lot of times was beds being available. It's not that there are not physical beds, it's that there are not enough people to service those beds. Like you cannot have RNs on some of these units having 24 patients to be, responsible for. And this is all over our state. This is all over our, like our healthcare system. We do not have enough staff, and that is staff from the lowest of DSPs or ISPs or whatever, whatever any particular agency calls them at this point, QSAs, whatever the phrase is nowadays, all the way up to people who are nurses, doctors, providers. Like we do not have enough. And I'm speaking specifically from something that was brought up where there were physical beds, there were no nurses. Like there were no nurses working at a particular major hospital that I'm not going to name, just because I'd like to keep a little bit of a boundary there. But
yeah,
they didn't have a nurse, a single RN on an entire floor of a major hospital in our state during the COVID pandemic. And like it wasn't a matter of not having a physical bed for somebody to lay their head. It was a matter of staffing, and our staffing still continues to be at a critical, at least I think, a critical point, whether that is in the population centers like Charleston and Huntington, or Parkersburg, or in the rural counties. Like I still firmly believe that staffing is at a critical level, and it's really going to impact everywhere that we could possibly think of.
No, I appreciate you saying that, and I think that's an important distinction to make, because people go to the physical space and the people, the workforce. It's an important distinction to make. So Lauren, I'll go to you, and then Tina, if you don't mind to go after Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. No, I couldn't agree more with the workforce issue, but I also think it's important when you talk about needing more beds, you talk about the right beds, and we really talk about the right level of care, because a lot of times people are being sent to acute care hospitals for things that are really chronic, that need kind of long-term behavioral management. And so you get denied feeling like that needs aren't being met, but really it's not the right level of care at the right time for the right need. So as we talk about beds and workforce, it's also important we match the right level of care in those beds. And our system is just really challenged with what I call the middle line services. We have outpatient services, we have acute services. We really need kind of more of these sort of long-term chronic services, definitely along dual diagnosis, but also recognizing that some of these needs are chronic and aren't going to get better in a hospital either. So continuing to build out the middle with services to keep people in the community with both housing needs and medical and mental health needs met is an ongoing challenge that often need all. But I think we lose our soul and we do people a disservice if we only talk about beds. I think that, or placement, those are words that I know are important. We all know that you need a placement in a safe spot, but I mean, it's really the right bed at the right time for the right level of need in the right location, because many times we know how to, what we need to get success. It's just not available, but it could be for many different reasons. It's just not that simple. I guess I know we know it's not simple, but it's important that we can't forget that putting people in too high a level of care also comes with its own risk to deterioration too.
No, great point. Thank you for saying that, Dr. Swagger. Tina, I know you and your group have really worked on this legislative season.
Yeah, and really, I don't see it as an issue of number of beds. I think some others have spoken about the right type of services and the staffing issues, but I think I can address some of the hospitalization problems. I was at OFLAC prior to this job for 13 years, and when I was there, the last few years particularly, the Hospital Association kept coming to us saying, if we cannot get nursing homes and behavioral health providers to take back people once they are admitted and ready for discharge, that they were just going to stop taking them. And they said that they didn't feel that they felt that they could do that because the majority of people that they saw were not having a medical crisis, but a behavioral one. And that providers, they felt, this is not me speaking, but just that they felt that those needs could be met in the community. And due to fear of just providers, dropping off the person and not coming back to get them, that they were having a real crisis of people being there well over a year just because they couldn't get another provider to bring them back. So I think part of it is that they have a very low expectation of what's going to happen when the person gets dropped off. And they feel that there's a very high probability that when that person's ready for discharge from the hospital, or if they're not even ready to be admitted, that they're not going to be able to get a hold of anyone to come back and pick up that person. And that's just my 2 cents from those years working at OFLAC.
Thank you, Tina.
And I would say that that's probably because there's not that in between or continuum of care. It's you get into the situations where you can't provide the care. And yeah, the hospital is not the right place for them. But if you can't provide the care because there's no other supports for those providers, and you're in those situations where you're trying to balance the safety of everybody, including the person that you're having maybe those issues with at that time. How do you keep everyone safe? Because this, unfortunately, in the state, they don't have those intermediate level of care to help stabilize that person or to be able to really focus on how to help them. And unfortunately, I think that's what's created it, is the state's kind of failed to keep following through with what they've promised to do for the population.
Real quick, Heidi, and I'll turn it back to you. Jillian, you had your hand up. Bring it back.
I think there is a real place for institutionalization, because I don't know a better word. So like a step down from institutionalization, but a step up from hospital, I guess, that can be created, where wards can be created to meet these members where their current needs are and work them up through that system to be out in the community, fully adapted, but also that institution function within the community. And so part of the regulation for having it, you know, is that they have to go out into the community. So, you know, ever so often. But I mean, I have a member now who's running away just for the fun of it. Literally just for the fun of it. And he's gonna end up getting run over, and I can't get him moved fast enough. I have another member who's on fire, causing all of his direct care staff to quit in a system where people already aren't paid enough, and you know, but I do think those systems could be created, and it would be a very happy medium. That we have a lot of members who don't feel comfortable in the community at large, but would feel comfortable in a community of their own members, and meeting people where they are intellectually, unlike what some of the people who come and review everybody want them to have. And I don't know how anybody would go about creating such a facility, but I know from growing up in this system, my siblings are in the system, I work this system, I know it is something that could be done.
Mm-hmm.
If the right people would head it up and who knew what they were doing. Right, like an IDD campus, whoever said that, Jason. Yes, an IDD campus where we're teaching them functional life skills in a setting that is comfortable for them, where we could truly integrate them into their community because we've taught them the things. And then they're in their community if they never get past that point. But all these systems, they're too hard to work. Nobody can get in because there are agencies who aren't the most amazing, who drop their people off and don't come back and get them. And then you have people who really need that service who can't access it because of those agencies that have done that.
There's some of those examples that we didn't get into too much so we could have this conversation, but there's the Illinois, and we're actually going to hear from them a couple months from now. They've done something like this, but it's not a campus because they've really tried to not segregate and just call it something different. They've scaffolded care like you're talking about, Jillian, but done it in a way that so if they can't get past that, it's not, they're still in the community. They're still included within the community. So we'll be.
But you can put campuses anywhere. I mean, look at all of the state projects, you know, and housing and apartments and things like that. You could easily turn that into a campus in the middle of town. Like, there are ways to do it, and nobody's saying that this campus has to be on the outskirts in the middle of nowhere because these people need to not be seen. You know, and I think that's where everybody wanted to get away from the institutions, because these members do do have the right to access their community and not be locked away. But some of them do need to be locked away. Not forever, but they do need a level of care that those units bring to keep them safe until they understand how to be in their community and not get run over by cars just because they're bored today.
Right, yeah, the additional care. Tina?
Well, I guess I just would, for the person that's like running out in the street because they're bored, I'd be interested to know, what are they doing all day long? What's their schedule like? What's their level of
There's no
engagement?
staff.
What,
So
but are
it's
they,
an agency that this specific member is at an agency where they are struggling to be able to staff one
so he's running out into the street mainly because he's bored and he doesn't have
and
really
he's not like
meaningful
right
things to
on the
do.
street. He's just really faster than everybody else. He
But
got really long legs. He is super duper fast, and he is just faster than everybody. And once he learned that, he's just gone.
States are, I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Olmstead decision, but states are not to be providing services in institutional settings. That was upheld by the Supreme Court. We have Hartley, even though Hartley's been closed, there are still numerous court orders in place. Just to me, the answer is never institutionalize someone. I don't know of anyone that's ever benefited from being institutionalized. You look at the folks that go to Sharp Hospital because they have just chronic mental illness. They don't have IDD, but they just have mental illness. They get their little tune-up, they get out, and they stop taking their meds. I mean, the cycle just goes on and on. I mean, there's reasons why we don't have institutions today, but I guess that's probably, Lesley, that's probably a way broader question.
Well,
for
and
discussion.
it's really just a matter of using the right words.
Right.
So there are members who, when they're on fire, need a unit of being able to be protected so that they can't do those things until they understand fully that doing that could get you killed.
Well,
Right?
But those institutions are not going to keep people safe, Julian. I mean, you look at Hoopmont Hospital, they just burned the skin off. Someone's skin just melted off their entire body because they left them in a whirlpool that was too hot. It's not going to keep, just because you label it something like an
Right.
institution does not mean it's necessarily going to keep them safe.
Well, some of that comes from being able to hire a more quality of people because you are able to pay them a different wage too. I mean, there's bad people everywhere though, so like that's also not going to fix everything.
And you guys are bringing up all the factors that are making this really difficult. I think the campus idea, where they would prefer to live, having those opportunities, that training opportunity, where they want to live, whether so off a campus or anywhere it might be located, getting that accessible service is key. So I think that's a valuable piece. I think everyone's talking about it. In many instances, our lack of resources, our lack of ability collectively, the royal we, to get resources that we need to provide services are impacting these individuals' options. And I would be mad if my options were limited because somebody couldn't get their act together and get more people to provide those services. So I think that's that line of, you're absolutely right and Tina's absolutely right of, it just trying to keep it where they'd like to be, but they need those scaffolded services. Absolutely. They need those skills taught to them at certain points, just like we all do. So absolutely. Real quick, Jillian, if I could turn it back to Heidi, we've got one more client because I want your thoughts on this client too. So Heidi, can you just, and I'll move the slide if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So another client that we've encountered, 19 years old, has autism, schizoaffective disorder. So again, it's that co-occurring with some generalized anxiety, ADHD, depression, and due to their childhood, some PTSD criteria. They went to a hospital. We took them into our CRU. But from the hospital, they actually got them from an assisted living facility at 19 years old, 18 years old. They're living in an assisted living facility. Safe, yes, but is that appropriate for someone that age? No, absolutely not. What led to them going to the hospital? They blacked out and punched the staff who took off their headphones because they actually touched their cochlear implant, which is a trigger for this individual. We have actually tried to find long-term placement. Has been in the CRU for 4 months, which is definitely not ideal. It's a 30-day stay unit. And honestly, this person is so delightful. We got some issues with hygiene, but honestly, very delightful. We allowed some internet capabilities after a little while, and creates kind of this fictional world. And it was pretty sad, some of the things that happened in the fictional world, which is we ended up taking, when we found out some of the stuff that was going on, we ended up taking away that internet just simply because it was not safe and it was making things for the person a little bit more difficult. They're not eligible for waiver services because they had a major mental health diagnosis prior to the ID diagnosis. I still don't understand how that works. I still don't understand why that's that way. And it's been a barrier to them getting waiver or potential placement. On a paper, this gentleman is a mess. When we got the referral, they would refer to the incident where they punched this other the staff in the home as they blacked out. Basically, they did everything. They said it a lot without saying disassociated. So we were like, okay, what's going on? But honestly, this person wants to be helpful, which I think a lot, like even our kids, right? We usually bring the help out of them because like, oh no, I got this. Don't do it because it takes time and it's inconvenient when your kids help. But he wants to be so helpful. We have another individual kind of role modeling, and this person's younger than the other person they're role modeling to. We did FBA, and a lot of the problems we're having is the issues with hygiene are based on safety, the traumaticness of the childhood. We feel like cleanliness and hygiene is why they're avoiding taking showers. They're avoiding cleaning well. They're avoiding brushing teeth, washing hands. And we feel like that was probably something they did as a protection so they wouldn't be sexually assaulted when they were younger. They were. So there's some challenges there to get some FERBs in place to help the individual. But delightful. And if it wasn't for the political climate, we would love to have this person in our homes. But the scariness is with at this point. And as I'm sure this is also a big part of this conversation, how many of our agencies are going to be able to stay open? I lose $1 million a year providing residential services.
I have 2 big agencies in my area that I bet will not make it through 2024. That in the last week, they have both closed 4-bed homes.
Yeah.
And it's the one agency is down to 2 apartments and 2 8-bed homes, and they were a huge provider in our area. That I think they had 14 ALUs, and then their 2 big group homes, and they're down to 4.
Yeah, I closed about 4 homes during COVID.
Yeah. And somehow they all made the majority through the bulk of the problem with COVID. But then in late 2022, they couldn't hold anymore. And they've been closing houses ever since.
And
I
that's
have one member at another residential provider, because they don't have staffing, goes and sleeps at another one of the consumers' houses every night because they don't have a night shift for him. Every night. He doesn't get to sleep in his own bed in his own house. Every single night.
Yeah, that's very scary.
Okay, so we've had a really good discussion. These were questions that we wanted to ask you in case we needed to prompt, but I love this group because you provide great resources in your thoughts. So I think we've identified the factors that are in our minds that challenge us for finding placement, for keeping people in places where they want to be, where they need to be. I think our limited resources have been clearly defined on this call as well as our previous sessions. Does anyone have any positive kind of next steps, things that they've seen to leave us on a positive footing with regards to decision making? Teresa? Oh, you're on mute. You raise your hand. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had some pop up and I couldn't get the unmute button. But I'm in a social work, Masters of Social Work program. And in the chapter that I just read on my policy, in my policy class right now, they talked about community mental health, the community mental health center movement that started in the late 60s and was going pretty well up until federal funding changed under the Reagan administration. And so I was wondering how things might do better if we went back to that kind of method. Probably you have to like figure out how to change funding or something, but that might be that the community mental health center movement from the 60s to the 80s.
Thank you, Teresa. Jillian, do you have thoughts on that?
Now I'm the one that can't find my unmute button. I have been told that there are other states that have great programs that I know some of them aren't like waiver, like our waiver where they pay guardians or whatnot. But I really think that we need to concentrate the waiver on the 24/7 settings before we concentrate it at home. And I know that's awful, but I feel like they're on fire first, but there are other states like North Carolina that's supposed to have great services that if the state of West Virginia could blueprint the good things from all of these, from the states that have good parts, and we could mimic it, then we could take waiver and make it a great system. If we did that and convince the governor to give us money.
I have a question and I'm not sure how to raise my hand, but primarily to Jillian, because you said you were in the Eastern Panhandle and I am as well.
Mhm.
So I think I know the companies that you're referring to. Is it possible, not just in the Eastern Panhandle, but through the state, to have a campus-like setting that is staffed by different agencies there to kind of pull the workforce to provide services for more people at once without having to go to kind of individual apartments? If you had, say, 4 apartments with a common room, I don't know
So
if that
they don't look at that. No. No. So because waiver currently has done away with ISS times 1, that essentially would be a group home because you would be looking at 4 apartments and 1 living room or 4 bedroom.
well, no, so I'm thinking like a bedroom with a sitting area and maybe a kitchenette, and then like a gathering room, almost like a college dorm, a quad,
Mhm.
where each resident has their own individual space. And of course, I'm not talking somebody who needs one-on-one,
Right.
constant visual contact, but
I
where,
think you could, I think there is a place where that could work for people who are really borderline and maybe don't need traditional up your derriere waiver services, because we do have some of those. We do have some people that just have somebody, they just need somebody to come in an hour or two a day to make sure that they remember to take their meds and that they remember to turn off their stove and stuff before they go to bed. And I think you could create that and possibly bill it as a respite or something for the person who comes in and does that.
I'm just thinking if you had, say 3 or 4 people, even 6 people who needed 1 to 3 care. And it's
Mhm.
not a 3-bedroom apartment, but each apartment opens onto that common quad area
Mhm.
where you could have a series of direct care providers in the common area, but who have direct access to the personal area
I don't
to do
think
the
you
checks throughout that 8-hour shift.
I don't think you would be able to get enough staff to do it that way. The the houses we
Well, I'm
have
saying if
now, yeah.
I'm just saying, like, if one client is from company A, one client is from company B, one client is, and so forth, then the direct staff could be provided by each of those companies. And instead of having to
I don't think
provide a
we'd
direct
get all the
care
companies
provider,
to be on the same page to do that. I do think that could technically be done. Technically. I don't think you'd get the provider agencies to play nice with each other to do it.
I agree with that 100%. But in a perfect world, that would be one way to do it.
It could be, yes.
I like how you're thinking, Juliana. Creative thinking is where, it's going to get us to the end here. But Juliana, definitely have to, the onus is on us to play in the sandbox.
Yeah.
Well, there's also
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the Rest Assured program where you have camera monitoring instead of staff. I think that's widely underutilized for
What program is it?
Rest Assured. It's a sister company of Rescare, but any company can use it where you can have cameras monitoring from a remote location, actually in another state. So they monitor the client overnight. There's a call button they can use if they need something.
Oh, you really need mild clients for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are some clients who don't need 24-hour a week supervision.
and I mean, Jillian, that's where I come at. My son is 26 and he's autistic and he's fairly high functioning. So, I mean, I know like he has a group of friends and they're all autistic. They all went to high school together. And that's where I come with that idea of almost like a group home or a college quad, where you just have that one person who's going to check on them routinely, but is somebody's there all the time. And I've had a lot of clients that would fit that situation. And by doing something like that, you would take some of the pressure off to provide staff for clients who need more intensive help.
I think there's also, so here, I'm sure they have them in other areas too, but we have like affordable senior towers or like senior apartments
Yes.
that could be great for a certain part of our population where they don't need somebody with them all the time. And there are a couple people throughout the building or on each floor that if they needed services, the people would be there, but they would also be mostly independent. I think there is a level, especially with the huge high rate of autism that there is now and the borderline autism that we are seeing, where they're not so severe and they probably could be mostly independent, where that would be a great service to be able to open up and provide to them. I don't know that it could be a waiver service with the way that the waiver in and of itself works, but I think that there is a real model for availability for that.
Right. And because I go back to my son, he's 26, he lives at home, but I can be gone for even 6 hours. As long as he has a way to reach me by phone, he's good. No, he doesn't use the stove or anything like that when I'm gone. But like I said, that's where I come at this idea. There are a lot of, and it's not just autistic. I had a client that was Down syndrome who could stay by herself for a given period of time and was fairly independent, but she just needed that supervisor to make sure she ate, to make sure she took her meds, to supervise cooking, that light supervision. And if they could contribute, say you have 4 people, each of them contributes a fourth of the cost of the direct staff, it eases their budget. It eases the need for more staffing.
Right.
And then opens up for people who need more.
Right. I think there's a real availability possibly for that. I don't think it would work with the more severe consumers. And again,
No.
we'd have to get everybody on the same playing field. But I think there's a real potentiality for conversations to be had for the people that they do have that are mild like that maybe that is a solution to some of these agency staffing issues where they have one staff here and one staff here and one staff here.
Right.
And it could be at least a temporary solution because smaller placement, so anything that's less than that's unlicensed home doesn't have to go through the licensing process, which is difficult.
Yes.
So I'm gonna stop your creative thinking there because we're over and people are hanging on. I do want to tease you a little bit because again, some people have tried this. That's just you guys are talking about slightly different way, but we're gonna hear them in May during their session. And then again, just to kind of wrap this up, some resources, and I was typing in some things based on the discussion of additional resources we should add. So thank you for that. So be on the lookout for an email. We always have a summary email with take-home points and resources. Finish out housekeeping. If you need a certificate of attendance, shoot me an email, let me know, put it in the chat. I'll give you some time to do that before I shut it down, and we'll get those out. And then join us this time next month, and we'll, with the recording of this, we'll send more information about who that is and what we're talking about. So thank you all for joining us, spending your lunch break with us. Great discussion. Appreciate it. And more soon.